Well, bad hammy has Raven fans and fantasy football owners nervous. Lamar Jackson's hamstring injury has the former MVP in street clothes this week for Baltimore's game against Houston. He is out. Cooper Rush is in. He gets a start in his place. Of course, this injury also has fantasy football implications out there. Let's go ahead and see what this means for everyone. CBS Sports fantasy football expert Heath Cummings joins the show now. And Heath, if you're like me and you need to bench Lamar, I think I'm playing Katie Mox this week in our fantasy league. What are the streaming options at quarterback out there in terms of a quality backup if you don't have a quality backup?
Well, the nice thing for you is if you're playing Katie, she usually has 6 49ers on her team, and they're all hurt too. So you're probably going to be okay. I think the number one option if you're looking for a streamer this week has got to be Bryce Young. He has not been good this year, but any starting quarterback against the Miami Dolphins has basically been the number one quarterback in fantasy so far this season. They and the Dallas Cowboys both giving up more than 29 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. I expect the Dolphins are going to score against Carolina. Carolina missing their starting running back. Should be a breakout game for both Bryce Young and Tedero McMillan, and Bryce Young still available on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues. If you can't get him, then I think the guy a lot of people are looking towards is Jackson Dart, and you hope you get that rushing production. I also like Tua a lot on the other side of that game.
I like Tua even with Tyreek Hill out. See if Jaylen Waddle can shoulder the load there along with other guys like Darren Waller, too, had 2 touchdowns last week. All right, Jayden Daniels set to return for the Commanders under center this week, but no Terry McLaurin. Does that give you any caution or hesitancy in putting Jayden Daniels back in the starting lineup?
You know, I think that there is a degree of downgrade for Jayden Daniels just because you'd expect the rushing to be a little bit lower. He doesn't have his number one wideout, although Deebo Samuel has played like a number one wideout so far this year. But with all the other injuries and buys we have in fantasy football, I'm still starting Jayden Daniels. I'm just not ranking him like a top 3 quarterback as I did in the preseason. Deebo Samuel, as you can see here, an absolute must-start smash play in this matchup. And I also think you can potentially go back to Zach Ertz at the tight end position. He's been down a couple of weeks, but he has a great connection with Jayden Daniels. Daniels doesn't have McLaurin. I would expect the targets to be pretty highly concentrated between Deebo Samuel and Zach Ertz.
Let's do a little twofer here with the Tampa Bay Bucks. Tampa, one of these teams has been bitten by the injury bug a little bit. Bucky Irving at running back is going to be out. Mike Evans at wide receiver, they're out this week. Which running back for Tampa do you trust? And are you good with, let's say, Chris Godwin now in the lineup?
Yeah, I think as far as running back goes, they've got 2 guys that are going to touch the football. It's Rachaad White, it's Sean Tucker. We expect White to handle the vast majority of the passing downs work, and he's been more efficient this year as a rusher early in the year. So I'm viewing White as a top 20 running back. I think maybe even closer to top 15, somebody who's pretty close to a must start. Tucker, more of a flex. He's been very, very efficient as a rusher in the NFL. We just don't know how many touches he's going to get. What I'm kind of expecting is that White gets the 18 to 20 touches we've been seeing for Bucky Irving, and Tucker somewhere around 10 touches himself. I do think you should consider Chris Godwin a low-end number 2, high-end number 3 wide receiver. He made some mistakes in his first game back. We think that was shaking the rust off. The thing you like is that he was highly involved with 10 targets in that first game back. And so I do think Godwin's someone you could start.
All right, Bucky Irving not the only number 1 running back out this week. Chuba Hubbard in Carolina, he's out. Rico Dowdle is in. Are you buying stock in Dowdle this week?
Again, fantastic matchup. He's facing the Dolphins. We would start almost any starting running back against the Dolphins. I will start Rico Dowdle against the Dolphins. He's behind Rachaad White, another entry replacement for me, but ahead of Michael Carter. I think someone you can view as a low-end number 2 wide receiver. Looks like we've got a pretty strong consensus here amongst Dave, Jamie, and myself. Right around RB20. If he scores a touchdown, he'll probably be better than that, but you should expect somewhere around 18 touches. You should expect efficient rushing against this Dolphins defense.
I know a lot of fans out there, a lot of fantasy owners keep an eye on those inactive lists. Drop about 90 minutes or so before kickoff. If you have Brock Bowers as your tight end, I imagine you're keeping an eye on what the Raiders are doing. So let's say just as a backup, you need to stream a tight end in the event that he cannot play. He is questionable this week for Las Vegas. Who's someone you're keeping on the back burner just in case Bowers can't go?
Yeah, I don't have to speculate on if you have Brock Bowers because he's on about half of my teams, and it's been a miserable experience since the first 3 quarters of week 1. But if Brock Bowers is active, you play him. I'm not going to mess around with playing somebody else over him. If you find out he's a surprise scratch, somebody I want to look at is Tommy Tremble. First off, it's the great matchup against the Dolphins. We expect Bryce Young to do well. Tremble last week without Jatavian Sanders had a huge week. For the season, Bryce Young has targeted his tight ends at about a 23% rate. Wouldn't be surprised if it's an 18% target share for Tremble in a game that we expect to be high scoring.
You know, Heath, I feel like you took a lot of shots at the Dolphins defense here. You're basically saying start everyone against the Dolphins. So let's end. How about end on the Dolphins? Maybe positive note. Tyreek Hill is out. That's not positive, but it does give a guy like Jaylen Waddle a chance to explore himself as, wide receiver 1. Does he have that potential? Could he be that guy for this Dolphins offense?
I absolutely believe he could be that guy. Tua hasn't been quite the same guy this year, so I'm pulling back just a little bit on my Waddle expectation, but I view him as a must-start number 2 wide receiver. He's had 12 games since the start of 2023 where he's had at least 7 targets. He's averaged 17 PPR fantasy points per game in those 12 games. I think 7 targets is the absolute floor with Tyreek Hill gone in Miami for the season. And there's an upside that's even beyond that. It's quite possible that after this week, we're viewing Jaylen Waddle as a top 12 wide receiver rest of season, but he's a must-start number 2 this week.
Heath Cummings, fan of Jaylen Waddle, not a fan of Dolphins defense. But that's okay. You got to play who you got to play. This is fantasy. It's a little different out there. Appreciate you hopping on with us. Remember, for all your fantasy football updates, the latest news, and advice, check out Fantasy Football Today, a CBS Sports podcast. Check it out wherever you find your podcast or use that QR code that's on your screen right now.